Hi, I'm Allie with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to show you how to do a bezel set for a Rivoli crystal with very simple instructions using the SuperDuo 2-hold Czech glass beads. I'm also going to be using a Preciosa 14mm Rivoli crystal, and I'm using 0.006 wildfire thread, size 10 English beading needles, and 15O seed beads. The colors that I've chosen for this is a rose gold lined crystal. The SuperDuo is Crystal Magic Wine, and the Preciosa Rivoli here is the rose line color. What I'm going to be starting out with is threading my needle, and I have about 2 feet to 3 feet of my beading thread. You actually don't use a lot. I'm going to start by putting on a stop bead. So for the stop bead, I'm going to use a bead that isn't in my project. This is just a silver 11O bead that's here, and that's going to help me keep track of where I start. I'm going to take that stop bead down to the base of my thread, and I'm just going to leave about 2 inches of thread, taking my needle back up through my 11O bead once and twice. What I'm going to be doing then is making my first row, which is actually going to be the back here of the crystals. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to string 13 of my SuperDuos on. If you have a Rivoli that's a little bit bigger, if you're using a 16mm or a 20mm, or even if you're using a 12 that's a little bit smaller, you'll just want to kind of play around with the sizes of how many Rivolis to put, or how many of the SuperDuos to put around your Rivolis. So I have my 13 on here, and what I'm going to do with these is create a circle. So I'm going to take my needle and thread, and I'm going to sew back through 5 of my SuperDuos through the same hole that I had before. And what that's going to do then is circle up my thread. So 5 of these I'm sewing back through that same hole. I'm going to pull my thread tight then, and you're going to see that little kind of creation there that's coming into a circle. You're going to see all your beads there hanging out them. What I'm going to do now is actually a circular peyote. So if you know that, it's a little bit kind of tricky to think of this as circular peyote when you're working with the 2-hole beads, but it's that same pattern. I'm going to take my thread that's coming out between 2 of my SuperDuos, and I'm going to take it back so that the thread is going to be exposed on one of the side through the top hole. So my needle was going around in a counterclockwise motion. Now I'm going to take it around in a clockwise. In between each SuperDuo, I'm going to add one. So I go through the top hole of a SuperDuo, add another one onto my needle, and go through the next hole. I'm going to continue this the whole way around my project, adding a bead and going through the next hole of the SuperDuo. You want to make sure when you're doing this that you are catching every single hole and that your beads aren't positioned down at all and that you're not kind of missing any in place. I'm going to do this the whole way along, and I'm going to add 13 beads in between those 13 that I originally started with. So I've gone the whole way around my row here, and I'm at the last bead to add. I'm going to add my last bead, go through that last little up that I need to go through, that up hole. I'm also going to go through the first SuperDuo that I put on in the second row, and I'm going through the first hole of that SuperDuo. What I'm going to do then is change from going clockwise to a counterclockwise, and I'm going to go up through the top. So just like we did when we started that second row, to start our third row, we're going to do the same thing. What that's going to do is expose thread on the side of one of your SuperDuos. You're going to continue then just like you did the second row, and you're going to add a bead in between each of your second row here of your SuperDuos, going through the top hole of them. And I'm going to go the whole way around to do that for my third row. So here I have done the third row of my SuperDuo beads. I did my first row, then my second row, my third row. I'm going to do 4 rows in total, and same as I added the third row and the second row, I go through the first bead that was added in that third row, and I'm going to go back and change the direction of my thread, go up one of the side beads, and then go that you're seeing the exposed. Right now you don't want to pull super tight. As you're doing the 4th row, what you do want to do is start to pull your thread tight. What's going to happen is that, as you can see already, as I start to pull a little tight, you're starting to get it cupped. So it's starting to have some curvature to it. As I add the 4th row, I'm going to go in between here, and I'm going to really pull tight. And what that's going to do is that's going to create a little bit of a curve that's happening. So I'm going to continue doing this here with adding my beads, pulling my thread tight in between those, and that's going to create a little dome that my Rivoli is going to sit in. There are other ways to do this also. This pattern or cupping in the and bezel setting the Rivoli. This is one that's just very, very simple because you're only using some 15-0s and you're just using SuperDuos and you're doing 4 rows of the exact same thing. So it's an easy project here. Just keep that tail out of the way as you're sewing along. And you can see as I get further and further, it's really starting to kind of turn over and cup. I'm going to go through here again and just continue adding the whole way and pulling nice and tight as you're adding along your 4th row. When you get to the end of this 4th row, then we get to have fun. We're going to start to pick up our 15s and add our Rivoli in, and you'll see how that occurs and kind of how it sits in nicely. But this 4th row, as it expands and as you're pulling tight and kind of have that tension going, what you're going to do is pull it so that it's nice tight here, and our Rivoli is going to sit right in. So I'm going to finish up here on this 4th row, and then we're going to show you how we set our Rivoli right in place. So now that I'm done my 4th row here, you can see it's definitely forming a little cup, and the back is really kind of closed in. What's going to happen is this Rivoli is going to set in there and just kind of hang out. You'll see that point at the back, and then in the front you'll see your nice crystal. To do that, I'm going to start just like I did to add my other rows, except this time I'm not going to be adding any more of my SuperDuos. I'm going to be taking it up to the top hole of the first bead that went on the last row, and on goes a 15-0 seed bead. So the 15-0 seed bead is going to take the place of the SuperDuos now, and as I'm pulling nice and tight, that 15-0 is going to just sit right in between those little rows. After I put the first one in place and give it a nice tight pull, I'm going to drop my Rivoli in place. On goes a 15-0 seed bead through the next hole of my SuperDuo bead, and I'm going to continue sewing and just pulling nice and tight so that guy just wants to sit and hang out in there. And keep adding your 15-0s and sewing right along as you're getting done this layer here. What's going to happen is this is going to start to pull in, and we're going to see it nice and tight right around our Rivoli. I'm ready to put my last 15-0 in place. That's going to hold my Rivoli in, and I'm just going to go through that first hole of that last SuperDuo. I also went through the next 15-0 and the next SuperDuo. I'm going to show you now how to do some of that embellishment on the side. You can leave it at this point and it looks nice and sparkly and just kind of hangs out inside, or what you can do is you can embellish it. To embellish it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to snake back through some of my twin beads, or some of my SuperDuo here. You can use twin beads if you're looking to do the same design and you have some of those at home. Twin beads will also work. And I'm just sewing right down here, and I'm going to come up between my second bead row, counting from the back here, or from the front, third from the back. And what I want to do is I want to have my thread come out of the hole closest to the back of the second row of my beads. In between the beads, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 4 of my 15-0s. I'm going to pick those up on my needle. And then I'm going to sew over one of my beads here. I'm going to go over one of my beads in between. And that just creates a little hump that's going to sit there. Again, 4 more beads go on. And I'm going to sew through that next of my SuperDuos in line. I'm going to continue that the whole way around. And what that's going to do is just create a little look to it that's going on here with the a little bit of decoration. It's really easy to see on this one with that green. Here the color kind of blends in a little bit to that Rivoli and it's taken over. But I'm going to continue doing that the whole way around, just sewing 4 beads on and then going through that second hole of my duo. What I can choose to do then with these after I'm done is I can take the extra thread here and just sew back through along, zigzagging through my beads, sewing through hole 2, picking up hole 1 of this one, sewing through hole 2, and just zigzagging back through the beads. Take your thread then the whole way back through this row, this first row of your duos. Take off your stop bead and tie a little knot. What you're going to see then is just a little knot of thread right here that's hanging out. And these turn into a nice little pendant, or it could be a nice little pair of earrings. You can attach a jump ring here somewhere in between one of the rows. You could also make one of the rows have 8 beads on it to make a bigger loop, so that way you can attach to it if you want. But this is just a really nice, quick way to do a bezel set Rivoli using the SuperDuo beads. Check us out on Facebook and follow us on YouTube as well. And hopefully you have fun playing with these Rivolis and the SuperDuos and making these very quick and easy little bezel set earrings or pendants.